Hi, it's Ranger Stacey. We're coming to you from Sesquicentennial State Park in Columbia, South Carolina, and we are about to start part 2 of our daughter Taylor. We're about to start part 2 of our Discover Carolina Plantastic program. So this program is designed to meet the state science standards. I think I failed to mention that on our part 1 of our video. But it meets the state science standards for first grade. So if you're in first grade, sometime within the school year, some do it in the fall, some do it in the spring, but you have a plant unit and you start learning about plants and you're introduced to plants. And so in the spring, we get tons of first grade classes out here for field studies and we learn all about trees. But since that's not happening, we're kind of bringing the field trip to you. So in part 1 of our program, we reviewed the 6 parts of a tree, right? We talked about the roots, the stem, the leaves, the fruit, the seeds, and the flowers. And so if you were here, if you were a first grader and you were here on a field trip, the next thing we would do is you would get a leaf from a tree, and you would have to study your leaf. You would look at the color, the shape, the size. You would have to decide if you think your leaf is long and thin or big and flat, if the edge of your leaf is smooth, or if it's very, very pointy. You would look and see if your leaf was a different color on the front than it is on the back. You might rub your leaf gently on your cheek and decide if you think it's scratchy or smooth. And you might even smell your leaf and decide what you think your leaf smells like. And then after we've studied our leaves and become experts on our leaves, we go out on a short walk in the forest and try and find the trees that our leaves belong to. Okay, so you are joining us and we have found our first tree, okay? And so when we look at this tree, all right, I've got my leaf in my hand and I say, is my leaf a match? Is this the tree that my leaf belongs to? I think so. And you'll notice this leaf looks like a raindrop or a teardrop. And I'm going to tell you the name of this tree first because you might have heard of it before. This is called a dogwood. And if you joined us for part 1 of this program, you might remember when we were talking about the flowers on the trees, we said that if you were here about a month ago, some of the trees would have had big, pretty white flowers on them. Guess what? This is the tree that we were talking about. Do you see any big, white, pretty flowers on the dogwood now? No. And in fact, what I was getting at is this is actually called a flowering dogwood. So no, all the parts of the flower have fallen off for the most part. What about fruit? Do you see any fruit on the dogwood? Take a look right there. Okay, so those little clusters there, that's where the flowers were. And then guess what? The flowers turn into the fruit. That's where the fruit comes from. So what you're seeing are teeny tiny berries that have just started growing. So they're green, but eventually they're going to be bright red. Can we eat dogwood berries? No, we cannot. But who can? Animals, yeah, squirrels, birds, deer, raccoons. So dogwoods are great to have in the forest because they provide food for so many animals that live here. Okay, if you visited this dogwood tree in the middle of winter, guess what? It would not have a single leaf on it. Does anybody know what we mean when we say a tree is an evergreen? What does that mean when we call it an evergreen? Oh yeah, it stays green all year long. So, is the dogwood an evergreen? No, the dogwood is not an evergreen. It loses all of its leaves at the same time in the fall and has no leaves on it in the winter. Let's take a quick look at the bark of the dogwood. And if you could touch that bark, would you say it was smooth or bumpy? Bumpy. It has very bumpy bark, yes. And I want you to remember that because we're going to compare that bark to a couple other trees that live in this forest and decide if we think they're smooth or bumpy. And then lastly, we may have a little trouble getting the camera angle, but do you think this tree is super tall or not so tall? If we back up just a little bit, maybe we'll be able to kind of get an idea of the height of the tree. Okay, if you're thinking not so tall, You are correct. Yeah, dogwood trees are not very tall at all. They're one of the smaller trees in the forest. Okay, I have a tree joke for you. Do you guys want to hear a tree joke? Okay, this is good because if you don't laugh, I won't know. Oh yeah, you know this one. Okay, how can you tell a dogwood from other trees? I'll give you a second to answer. By their bark. Get it? Their bark like a dog? Okay. All right, I have another one that we'll do in a little bit. I've got one more tree joke for you since I know you loved that one.
I know what it is.
We'll see. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to go find the next tree that our leaves belong to. So follow us on the trail and we'll go see what we can find. So you guys, we're actually walking through, well, this is our primitive area. So when we do this program for kids here, they always ask, where are we? What is this? Is this a campground? It is. And if you're in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, this is where you would come camping. So we get to walk right through and kind of look at the campsites on our way to find our trees. Yep. You guys, the tree that we're looking for has a leaf like that, so be on the lookout. Oh, and I also meant to say, I forgot something important. If you've watched part 1 of our program, if you want to go out, if you have an outdoor space with some trees and you're able to collect a couple leaves, you're welcome to do that and kind of have those in your hand and play along with us and see if the leaves that you collect look anything like or match the trees that we have out here. So that's optional. You don't have to do that. And I only want you to take one. Don't take all the leaves off the tree because what would happen? The tree wouldn't live, right? Because it needs its leaves to make its food. Okay, we have come to our next tree. Let's see if it's a match. Let's compare our leaves here. What do you guys think? I think we found a match. All right, so this is our next tree. And you guys, what's the first thing you notice when you look at these leaves? Super sharp spines. Yes, these are super sharp leaves. Why do you think it has such sharp leaves? What is it for? To protect itself. Yeah, from what or who? Animals? Yeah, and probably people. Yeah, so it has these sharp leaves to help protect itself. And I'll tell you the name of this tree. This is a holly tree. Has anybody seen a holly tree before? Yeah, these are the holly trees. Do we see any flowers on our holly tree? You know, I think we did, but they might have just started going away. I don't know if I see any that are still blooming. So the holly tree has little teeny tiny white flowers. Not really the prettiest flowers in the world, but I will say this. If you walk by a holly tree when it's blooming, you want to take a big sniff, go and smell it because it smells really, really good. So not super pretty, but they smell amazing when they're blooming. How about fruit? Do we see any fruit on the holly tree? I'm not seeing any fruit yet, but if this tree, or when this tree has fruit on it, guess what? Red berries again. They're a little different than the dogwood though. The dogwoods are kind of oval shaped, where the holly berries are round. But do we eat holly berries? No, but who can eat holly berries? Animals, yeah. So just like the dogwood, birds, deer, squirrels, raccoons, holly trees provide a lot of food for the animals that live out here in the forest. So they're really important. Now, even though people don't eat holly berries, does anybody know what we might use them for around the holidays? What would we do with holly berries, and the leaves for that matter, during the holidays? Decorate. Yeah, people love to decorate with the leaves and the berries during Christmas time and the holidays in December. Okay, let's look a couple more things at this tree. Oh, you guys, if you visited this tree in the middle of winter, guess what? It would look exactly like this. So is the holly an evergreen? Yes, the holly is an evergreen. Thumbs up on the evergreen. Yeah. So the dogwood's not an evergreen. The holly, evergreen. So that doesn't mean that it doesn't lose leaves. It just loses them a little bit at a time at different times of the year, not all together in the fall. If you can see the bark of the holly tree, would you call that smooth or bumpy if you could touch it? You think that bark is smooth or bumpy? Okay, I would definitely call that smooth bark. Think about that compared to the dogwood, you guys. That has a really, really smooth bark compared to the dogwood. And then lastly, if we can, I know this is tricky with the camera, if we can get an overall view of the tree, we've got to decide if this tree is super tall or not so tall. And I would tell you this holly tree is not so tall. Sometimes we say that it's medium. It's kind of in between. But if you look, there are some trees that are way taller than the holly tree. So similar to the dogwood, the holly tree is just kind of medium height, not super tall. Okay, so we found 2 of our trees that our leaves belong to. We have 1 more to find, and we don't have very far to go. And the tree that we're looking for, and this poor leaf is starting to kind of wilt. So I'm going to hold it upside down. That is the last tree that we have to find today. So let's go find it. No, it's up here. Oh yeah, we can check along the way. But I don't think so. But that one could have flowers. Okay guys, we've come to our last tree. So normally what I would say is this anybody's tree? Let's look at our leaf and look at the leaves on the tree. I know that's probably a little hard to see. What do you guys think? I think we found a match. Yep, so this is our last tree. Now, before I tell you anything about this tree, I want to show you something first. So I've got to dig into my backpack here real quick. And what I have in here is a root from one of these trees, okay? So this is just a piece of a root from this tree. And what I'm going to do very carefully, don't get too close to the blade here, I'm just going to shave a little bit off of this root. And the reason I'm doing that is because it just gives it kind of a fresh cut and kind of opens up the inside a little bit. And then when the students are here and I put my super sharp blade away, we hold it up to our noses and smell it. So we're going to let Taylor do that. What do you think it smells like?
I think it smells like root beer.
It smells like root beer. Raise your hand if you've had root beer before. Yeah, and the reason I ask that is because root beer is kind of an old-fashioned soda, right? We don't drink it all the time like we used to, but I love root beer. Now, this is not called the root beer tree. I mean, I guess we could call it that, but it has a real name. This is called sassafras. Can you say that with me on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. Sassafras. Yeah, so it's sassy sassafras. And so guess what? People used to dig up the roots way back in the olden days, and they'd grind them up and brew them, just like we brewed tea. And they called it sassafras tea, but you know what it really was? The first ever root beer. Yeah, and sassafras is still used in some root beer recipes even today. And then Taylor's got in her hand, they even make an old-fashioned sassafras flavored candy. And everyone always says they want to try it, and you'll notice the bag is empty. We've eaten it all. It's really good. But so you can find sassafras candy at places like Tractor Supply, Sportsman's Warehouse, Cracker Barrel. So let's study our sassafras tree a little bit here. Do you see any flowers on the sassafras tree? No, me neither. How about, do you see any fruit on the sassafras? Nope, no fruit. If you visited this sassafras tree in the middle of winter, guess what? Not a single leaf on it. So is the sassafras an evergreen? Nope, the sassafras is not an evergreen. It loses all of its leaves in the fall. Let's look at the overall size of the tree first, and then we'll zoom in on the bark. What do you guys think, if you can tell? Do you think it's super tall or not so tall? Not so tall. You guys, this is kind of like the dogwood, one of the shortest or smallest trees in the forest. So the sassafras trees don't get very tall. And then we'll take a quick look at the bark and decide if we think that bark is bumpy or smooth. And after we do that, we have one more amazing tree joke for you today. So let's check out our bark real quick, and then Taylor's going to deliver joke number 2. Tree joke number 2. All right, so think about that bark compared to the dogwood. Think about that compared to the holly tree. So I would definitely say if you could touch that bark, it would feel bumpy, right? Definitely bumpy. But look how different it is from the dogwood and the holly. Remember, the dogwood was real kind of chunky and blocky, and this one has a lot of lines or kind of stripes in it. So every tree has a different kind of bark, but I would say this is bumpy, not so much smooth. All right, Taylor, would you like to tell our final tree joke?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. What's a tree's favorite drink?
All right, what's the answer?
Root beer.
Get it? Root beer. Oh, hilarious. Okay, so guys, this ends our part 2 of our Discover Carolina Plantastic video that we brought you today. So remember, if you're watching this, hopefully you've seen part 1, and it'll tie in with our part 2. Again, oh, and I want to thank, I forgot to introduce our cameraman, John Wells. There's his hand. And he's done an awesome job of doing all this filming and zooming in. I told him I cannot do that part of the job. So we're so happy to have him behind the camera and appreciate all the great camera work. And we hope to see you in the parks, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Have a great day.